Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to do something a little different today. We're unpacking 15 massive, high-impact global developments, and we're looking at them from a single day, August 4th, 2026. We're cutting right through the noise and getting straight to the facts. Because, our goal here isn't just to read you the news. It's to really understand the underlying currents that are shaping our world right this second. And honestly, it raises a pretty fascinating question. What actually defines a single day in global news? In the highly interconnected world we live in now, a 24-hour cycle can jump from intense geopolitical maneuvering in the Middle East all the way to massive corporate AI gains. So we're looking at how just one day can completely shift the global landscape, and more importantly, what that means for all of us. All right, here's our roadmap to help us make sense of it all. First, Middle East and diplomacy. Second, global economy and markets. Third, U.S. politics and policy. And finally, number 4, international and regional updates. Let's dive in.
Starting off with Section 1, Middle East and Diplomacy.
So this first development is a perfect, almost literal example of the classic carrot and stick approach in international statecraft. On the carrot side, we're seeing actual progress on a proposed transit framework between the U.S., Iran, and Oman. The idea is to reopen shipping channels in the crucial Strait of Hormuz. They'd set up split transit lanes controlled by Iran and Oman, complete with maritime service fees. Sounds cooperative, right? But then, here comes the stick. At the exact same time, the U.S. Treasury Department rolled out new OFAC sanctions. These are laser-focused on marine insurance entities tied to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, specifically Hormuz Safe and Persian Gulf Marine Insurance, along with 8 foreign-flagged tankers. The goal is to crack down on illegal Iranian revenue. It's just wild to see how nations can negotiate at the table with one hand while simultaneously applying this intense financial pressure with the other. Sticking with diplomacy, we're seeing a really stark contrast between a high-level proposal and the messy reality on the ground. The U.S. just laid out a multi-stage Board of Peace plan, which is designed to disarm Hamas in Gaza. But Israeli officials are expressing some deep reservations about this, mostly about the sequencing. Like, how does this actually get implemented step by step? In the meantime, regional mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey are keeping the discussions going. It really highlights the friction between these broad diplomatic frameworks and the heavy skepticism about how they're going to play out in real time. And tragically, while all this diplomacy stalls, the human cost just keeps mounting. 35. That is the number of civilian fatalities reported by regional human rights monitors after a devastating drone strike. A Sudanese armed forces drone hit a civil court headquarters in North Darfur State. It's a stark, heartbreaking reminder of the human toll unfolding in Sudan right now, a conflict that absolutely demands global attention, even when other geopolitical events are dominating the headlines. Okay, let's transition to Section 2, Global Economy and Markets. Moving away from global conflicts, let's look at the economic engines driving things right now. And wow, massive global demand is totally reshaping the tech economy. Case in point, Palantir Technologies. They just reported an absolute blowout in their Q2 earnings. We're talking a staggering 149% surge in commercial revenue. And naturally, that drove a 16% spike in their stock price right away. So what's fueling this? It's the intense worldwide corporate scramble for AI sovereignty and private enterprise models. Basically, companies are rushing to lock down their own private AI infrastructure, and the market is massively rewarding the businesses providing the tools for this modern AI gold rush. Now, just like corporations are fierce about protecting their AI, nations are aggressively protecting their strategic trade. We're seeing a major shift in North American trade policy. The U.S. is officially signaling a potential restructuring or maybe even a non-renewal of the USMCA. Why? Well, they're trying to curb Chinese supply chains that are allegedly being rerouted through Mexico to dodge tariffs. And this isn't just tough talk. It's already forcing Ottawa and Mexico City to adjust their defensive trade postures. It's a prime example of how legacy trade agreements are essentially being weaponized in the broader economic competition between the U.S. and China. Zooming into the labor force for a second, we also just saw a massive transportation disruption that was resolved incredibly quickly. Over 4,400 WestJet flight attendants staged a day-long strike. The dispute was all centered around duty pay and compensation. But the Canadian Union of Public Employees and WestJet quickly hammered out a tentative deal by early Monday, and those grounded flights all across Canada were restored. It's wild how fast critical infrastructure can just grind to a halt, but also how urgently these labor agreements get forged to get everyone moving again. Moving right along to Section 3, U.S. Politics and Policy.
Voters across 5 very distinct states, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, Virginia, and Washington, just headed to the polls for key congressional and gubernatorial primaries. But look, this is about way more than just individual state races. These elections are essentially setting the battlefield for some highly contested redistricting fights, and they're revealing some major intra-party shifts as we get deeper into the election cycle. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Now consider this number, 450,000. That is the staggering number of student borrowers who are finally cleared to receive loan discharges and refunds. This comes right after the conclusion of a massive, long-running court challenge known as Sweet v. McMahon. These are folks who were defrauded by for-profit institutions. So this ruling marks the definitive, final end to a years-long legal saga over educational debt relief. Just a massive impact for almost 500,000 people. Over in the workplace policy arena, the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, just handed down a major unanimous decision. They affirmed that Whole Foods did not violate federal labor law by enforcing a dress code policy that bans political and social messaging displays during work hours, which specifically included Black Lives Matter displays. This is a big deal because it sets a very clear objective legal precedent regarding where the boundaries are for employer dress codes and social messaging inside a physical workplace. And speaking of domestic issues, this one highlights a truly alarming vulnerability. Municipal water and wastewater management systems across at least 7 U.S. states reported coordinated cyber intrusions today. And these weren't small glitches. The attacks were severe enough to force temporary manual shutdowns of these critical utility systems. Obviously, this triggered immediate sweeping investigations by the FBI and CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. But man, it really underscores a growing threat to the basic municipal utilities that keep our cities running every single day. Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 4, International and Regional Updates. It's honestly incredible how interconnected global disruptions are. Let's take a rapid-fire tour of 3 vastly different regions. First, in Ukraine, there's an intensified, long-range deep strike drone campaign. They're hitting dual-use logistics facilities and Black Sea targets, putting severe pressure on Russia's informal military supply chains. Meanwhile, over in Egypt, a 5.4 magnitude earthquake triggered immediate emergency response protocols across municipal areas to check for infrastructure damage. And then in India, we have 2 huge legal and political developments. Political leader Prashant Kishore grabbed a notable victory in the Bihar by-polls, and at the same time, the Indian Supreme Court ordered the dismissal of routine protest cases against student demonstrators across multiple states. 3 entirely different regions dealing with massive shifts in security, nature, and politics.
Let's consider one last number today, 11 million. That is the massive labor deficit Russia is projected to face by the year 2030. And look, this isn't just some abstract economic stat. It's a profound social shift. This shortfall is actively exacerbating domestic political tensions because the country is growing increasingly dependent on migrant labor just to keep its economy and industries running. You know what they say? Demographics are destiny. And this definitely points to a highly challenging road ahead for Eastern Europe's largest economy.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to just take a second and consider the sheer scale of today's news. We went from dual-track diplomacy in the Middle East and an AI-driven corporate boom to U.S. infrastructure cyber attacks and a demographic crisis in Russia. It's a lot to take in, but which of these 15 developments do you think will truly have the longest-lasting impact on our global future? History isn't just a textbook we read. It's being written in real time every single day. Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me for today's explainer.